Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a life-changing story. Introduction. Two fathers, two paths. Imagine growing up with two influential father figures, each offering different perspectives on life, money, and success. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, faced this unique situation in his childhood. He had his biological father, whom he refers to as Poor Dad, and his best friend's father, Rich Dad. These two men played pivotal roles in shaping Robert's worldview, particularly when it came to finances. Poor Dad, despite being well-educated and holding a steady government job, was financially insecure. He believed in following the traditional path, working hard, saving money, and relying on the stability of a government job. His life was based on conventional wisdom: get a good education, find a secure job, and retire with a pension. This was the safe path, the predictable path, the one that most people follow. On the other hand, Rich Dad was an entrepreneur with no formal education, yet he amassed great wealth. His philosophy was drastically different. Instead of working for money, Rich Dad believed in making money work for him. He was focused on financial education, learning how money functions in the world, and leveraging opportunities to build wealth. Unlike Poor Dad, who worked hard his entire life without accumulating significant wealth, Rich Dad understood the value of taking calculated risks and investing in assets that generated income. These two men's differing views on money created a constant tension in Robert's life as he had to navigate between these two perspectives. What would Robert choose? Would he follow Poor Dad's advice and stick to a life of job security? Or would he take the riskier route and follow Rich Dad's unconventional teachings about wealth? The tension was real, and Robert was caught in the middle, learning lessons from both fathers that would shape his financial future. What Robert didn't know at the time was that the choices he made as a young adult would determine whether he would follow the path of the traditional worker or carve out a new path of financial freedom and independence. The first lesson. The importance of financial education. Robert's journey into financial literacy began when he was just a child. At the age of 9, Robert asked Rich Dad how to get rich. Rather than giving him a simple answer, Rich Dad introduced him to the idea that the rich don't work for money. They make money work for them. At first, this idea was hard for Robert to comprehend. After all, Poor Dad had always taught him that the key to financial success was working hard, getting a stable job, and saving money. This was the traditional route that Poor Dad followed, and it seemed to make sense at the time. However, Rich Dad wasn't focused on earning a paycheck. Instead, he taught Robert to focus on building and acquiring assets. The key was not to work for money, but to have money work for you. Rich Dad explained that financial education was the missing link for most people. While the formal education system may teach people how to become good employees, it doesn't teach them how to think like entrepreneurs or investors. Two essential skills for building lasting wealth. This was Robert's first major lesson: the importance of understanding how money works. Over time, Robert would learn that the traditional route of working hard, earning a paycheck, and saving for retirement would not lead to financial freedom. Instead, the path to wealth involved understanding how to create and acquire assets, and how to make those assets generate income. Robert's own Poor Dad, who worked a steady government job, was financially secure but never wealthy. Despite his education, he lacked the crucial financial knowledge that would have allowed him to build wealth. Rich Dad, on the other hand, without formal education, had the wisdom and financial literacy to make smart investments, create multiple income streams, and ultimately achieve financial independence. The shift. Rethinking the traditional approach to money. As Robert moved into adulthood, he started to see the stark contrast between the two father figures' lives. Poor Dad followed the traditional path of education and employment. He worked hard for his paycheck, saved a portion, and hoped to retire with enough money to live comfortably. But despite his efforts, Poor Dad was always financially stressed. He never seemed to have enough money for anything beyond his basic needs, and his savings were minimal. Rich Dad, in contrast, had taken a completely different route. He was an entrepreneur, a risk taker, and an investor. He understood the importance of leveraging money and resources to build wealth. Through investments in real estate and businesses, Rich Dad was able to create multiple streams of passive income. His wealth wasn't tied to his ability to work. He had made his money work for him. This was a pivotal moment for Robert. As he reflected on the lives of both fathers, he realized that the life poor dad had chosen wasn't one of financial freedom. He had worked tirelessly for a paycheck, and yet, his financial situation had never improved. Robert had to face the hard truth. Following the traditional path wasn't enough to achieve the kind of wealth and freedom he desired. This is when Robert made the decision to follow Rich Dad's advice. He began to invest in his financial education, learning about real estate, stocks, and business ownership. It wasn't easy. He made mistakes along the way, and the journey wasn't smooth. But every step was a lesson, and Robert became more committed to his vision of financial independence. The power of assets and liabilities. As Robert continued his education, he came to understand one of the most crucial lessons in financial literacy: the difference between assets and liabilities. Rich Dad emphasized that the key to wealth was to acquire assets, things that generate income, and avoid liabilities, things that drain resources. For Rich Dad, assets were investments in real estate, stocks, and businesses. These assets generated passive income, money that came in regardless of whether he was working or not. Poor Dad, however, had always focused on acquiring liabilities, such as a house or a car, thinking they were assets. But in reality, these items cost money to maintain and didn't produce any income. Robert's financial education took a crucial turn here. He realized that most people were caught in a cycle of working hard for money, but spending that money on liabilities, never creating true wealth. This was the key difference between Rich Dad and Poor Dad. While Poor Dad spent his life acquiring liabilities, Rich Dad focused on acquiring income-producing assets. This was a mindset shift that Robert had to fully embrace in order to take control of his financial future. The road to financial freedom. Action and risk. Taking. Robert knew that becoming financially free wouldn't happen overnight. It required discipline, focus, and a willingness to take risks. But the rewards were clear. Instead of working for money, Robert had learned that he needed to build systems and acquire assets that would make money work for him. One of the most significant lessons Robert learned from Rich Dad was the importance of taking risks. Many people are afraid of risk because it feels uncertain. But Robert came to understand that risk is essential for growth. It's not about taking reckless chances. It's about making informed, calculated decisions that can lead to bigger returns. The wealthiest people in the world didn't just avoid risk. They learned how to take smart risks. Rich Dad taught Robert that failure wasn't something to fear. In fact, failure was an opportunity to learn and grow. Every mistake was a valuable lesson on the road to financial success. The final lesson: financial independence and legacy. In the end, Robert's journey proved that financial freedom is attainable through financial education, smart investments, and the ability to acquire assets that produce income. By focusing on building assets, avoiding liabilities, and taking calculated risks, anyone can change their financial trajectory. However, the most important takeaway from Rich Dad Poor Dad is that financial education is not just about accumulating wealth. It's also about creating a legacy. Rich Dad wasn't just focused on making money for himself. He was focused on creating wealth that could benefit future generations. This, too, was a lesson Robert learned and applied in his own life. The path to financial freedom is not easy, but it's possible for anyone who is willing to take control of their financial education and take action toward building wealth. It all begins with a shift in mindset, understanding that the rich don't work for money. They make money work for them.